was young when it happened, the great catastrophe of my people. Solstheim. It is large and on the coast, but there are smaller clans, tribes that wished for a more isolated, less dense community. Truly, I am from Sol's Rest, less than 100 of us, less than 50 when I left. The monster that caused it, hard for a young kid to understand, but it found its way in peacefully. It deceived, manipulated our people. Why? I still ask myself that. There is little that the rest has ever done to craft enemies, only openly detesting the foul nature of dragons, their greed, the power many of them hold, without a thought for those in need of it. The majority of my kin who have traveled like I do have faced misjudgment, as if we are allies to those beasts. I guide myself through lands unknown to correct those qualms of my kin. I am a warden, one that separates dragonborn from serpents, from dragons and drakes, wormlings to wyverns. I have traversed dwarven hills and elven seaside sanctuary forests, climbed Goliath mountains, and learned the language of giants at their peaks. I pierced the veil to the Feywild and discovered new ways to track my foe. For 10 years I have been away, and am so far gone that I don't know that I'll ever return. I'll never know if my father recovered. I'll never get to tell them if I succeeded, because I was fooled. For years I sought the deception on lips that were not my own, and in an effort to further discover and track the foul doer, I traded away my trinket, the compass that never seemed to point north. And from that, months have passed, surviving off bone marrow, while I continue my search. In hell, I made a mistake, and I paid for it.
Dresh Alkash is a dragonborn that when in his teen years was living among kin in a tribe located at Sol's Rest, what Dresh will one day assume to be, shape-changer, found its way into the Rest, and for reasons unknown to him, summoned or transformed into a monstrosity capable of cutting the population in half. It's so difficult for him to know because, although he was matured, his father still served as a protector, and therefore Dresh was to only focus on training until his father was unfit to protect, and when things went awry, his mother forced him and her into the safest place of their home. Only the beams collapsed. To this day, he can still feel her arms around him, He could still see her smile, but back then, with everything happening, he didn't realize he couldn't hear her breathing. He didn't know that she was what stopped him from being crushed. Dozens upon dozens of the tribe were buried, a ceremonial ritual which gave their essence to the land, to the plains. His father was still critical and unsure if he would ever wake. The weight of all of this was crushing him, finding himself on his knees, claws deep into the earth, tears gliding down the edge of his scales. There was this thrum, almost like a second beat of his heart to reassure him that there was hope. He stared at the fresh mounds of soil and felt peace for a change. And later, while he sat beside his father's recovery, eyes closed, breathing still weak, he saw the compass. Familiar. Dresh had seen it before, but now holding it and staring out to a setting sun, he realized something was off. It didn't seem to point north, and the thrum in his chest beat again. So for what might have been the last time, he said goodbye to his father and let the compass guide him. And for months into years, a full decade will pass while Dresh allows the compass, the thrumming, to continue guiding him through his adventure in search for the one responsible for the Soul's Rest massacre. His journey began, meeting stubborn as always dwarves. They occupied the mineral-rich lands of the Iron Hills, and through hard work, he gained their respect, mapping out mines that would eventually aid in the joint effort to defeat a colony of worms that had been sapping out the deposits to become more durable. He left them saying in Dwarvish, "I am nothing but what my kin have guided me to be, so know that we are good, and we protect those who protect us." And moving on from them, the trinket continued east to the far coast. Eventually, within dense forestry and flora, all windswept and smelling of sea salt, it was his eyes that would learn to train after this day, as hidden within the shadows were elves that found sanctuary between tree and sea. With little effort, Dresh was surrounded and captured. A venomous serpent had begun to torment their kind, and crawling from the shore came crustaceans that they warred with. There was little to be done to gain their trust, but in time, lesser restorations of their hierarchy showed promise in him. Lessons exchanged of a favored enemy marked for the hunt to gain keen eyes of the elves and nimble feet. Soon, seen as an ally, he fought the final battle against the serpent, and in the end, the venom did discolor some of his scales, and he was left bedridden, but aided by those elves. Once healthy enough to leave, he left them saying in Elvish, "I am nothing but my kin have guided me to be, so know that we are good, and we protect those who protect us." And from the coast, he traveled north. This led him to Goliath Mountains, freezing cold temperatures, a place where, while scaling towards his compass's guideline, he survived off of snow that melted from body heat across mineral-rich veins. Dresh's use of absorbing elements would shield him from the worst of piercing winds, and even when he attempts to recall it, he still thinks that the first time he saw fire there, after weeks of bone-chilling near death, he still doesn't know if that light was ever real. And luckily, he was too exhausted to be seen as a threat, almost frozen on the outskirts of those who spoke giant. One of them, strangely enough, pulled the icicle of a dragonborn from the snow for the others to see, thawed him by the fire. Now, they didn't trust him, but they knew he wasn't what they dealt with, because what they dealt with didn't know cold, couldn't feel it, but they could breathe it. And although Goliath had grown resistant to the cold, they were not immune, and this trio of young dragons that had begun to cause more trouble than they would ever know, well, through the shared language, Dresh successfully aided in a trap that left this outlier of the trio restrained, bones of Dresh's kin growing around it to pierce it with each twitch, still unknowing if it was ever the right decision. Well, Dresh will never know, because to take a dragon at its word is not something one would ever do, and he recommended that the Goliath did not let it leave. With confession before execution, the Goliath sought out the young dragon's lair. A half-dozen or so raging warriors, with aid from Longbow, claimed end to 3 dragons that day. It was here that Dresh felt his hardest thrum in years, looking over his shoulder to the sound of an egg cracking. Uncertain, truly, of its material making, the newborn Drake nestled deep in his bag as he left the mountains, saying to those in giant, "I am nothing but what my kin have guided me to be, so know that we are good, and we protect those who protect us." With a best effort to get from the cold, Dresh didn't look to the compass for once. His only focus was the thrum he felt when he would hold and look into the eyes of the white drake, small, obsidian black circles staring back at him. This thing would grow into a dragon, but it didn't yet know how to be an awful one. And in the nights traveling down, its body was warm around his neck, and countless times it would gurr and rumble with the love that was soon swallowed by a shh from Dresh. And for months he watched it grow, coming to call it whisper, as it would only growl its draconic murmurs softly in age. And for what was almost a year, he focused on raising this creature, not allowing for it to know greed, showing it only truth. Truth which did involve the fear of those who wouldn't understand it at first, but that you must earn the trust from others by showing that you're good. The morning of 1 year after finding Whisper, Dresh woke up to that thrum again, and somehow the compass was already gripped tightly in his hand. He followed, and it led to a gate, a veil where from here led somewhere else entirely. He looked to his companion, and they entered together. It revealed to them the vibrant reality that is the Feywilds, a place without real bearing, easy to get lost, but also easy to feel free. While within the lands, he would come to travel alongside of a fairy far too familiar with the infernal and where they come from, but also a Harengon hunter, similar but different to himself. Together, Those two were seeking correction of a court, and by correction they likely meant assassination. Their chaotic nature left Dresh uneasy, and when he woke the night before the attack from the same thrum that led him here, he took that opportunity to seek it out and find that same veil that would send him home. Or so he thought. But before he looked back to the twinkle that remained of the fairy's fire, he said in Sylvan, "I am nothing but what my kin have guided me to be, so know that we are good, and I cannot kill those that I do not know have done harm." And though it did seem brief, the Fae is wild in many ways, including time. Dresh, after, found himself miles away from any major settlement, coming along a caravan headed to one. Along the trail, he managed to convince them to let him travel alongside them for a payment of 10 gold pieces for the week's travel. The caravan had formerly employed a hardy farmer that they described let his conscience get the better of him, setting off to do good or die, who knows. Dresh arrived with them to what was more of a melting pot than he had ever yet seen. Even the encounter with the merchants was a surprise that they didn't try to defend from him instead of hiring him to get here. It wasn't long before he was lost in the idea of feeling normal, but it was even quicker that a random townsfolk knocked that thought right out of him. But maybe that was just city life. A real bed, a hot meal with tea after, a luxury not often indulged. More than usual, Dresh was focused on surviving, living in wilderness, and yet might have this been the first time that he even thought about why he left that place to begin with? I mean, yes, he had done much to ease what people thought of his kind, but what of the monster that hurt them? He rolled that idea around while he finished his tea, as a glaive-wielding human walked by and ordered a meal. The thrum, the compass, pulling it out, it pointing to that human. This led Dresh and the human, Jeb, to be on the same job, one involving protecting a young woman from a noble who refused to take no for an answer. Climactically, coming under attack by a demonic creature and minions of this noble. For once, had Dresh overplayed his capabilities? That was the last time he ever saw Jeb, and he can barely remember what happened. Blindfolded and gagged, but smelling brimstone, whoever this was spoke directly into his mind, and later found out that it was searching through his thoughts. It was who made the offer.
"You care so much for strangers. The girl will let her go. As for Jebediah, you might see him again. But for your life, I want that trinket that you hold so dear. The compass that doesn't point north. How does that sound? And your nemesis. It goes by the name of Thrice Cruel. And if you agree, I'll send you where they're headed."
Dresh agreed, not really to avoid death, but to save who he had failed. And that leads us to hell. His knowledge of it, second-hand, but he knows of a greater devil somewhere in the mid-levels with woven transformation abilities. He holds out faith that Jebediah was sent here as well, if only to apologize for his failure. But most importantly, thrice so cruel. But it's been weeks, and broken bones with charred flesh can only sustain for so long. Is this the end? Or is this the beginning again? Dresh plants his bow in the dry grounds, rests his head on it, exhales, almost to give up. Then he feels that thrum again.